So welcome and thank you so much for joining me, Susie. I've got Susie Ballentyne joining me. She's a psychologist on the podcast this week. And the reason I asked her to join me was because I always talk about the importance of being authentically yourself when it comes to your style. And, just really getting a clear understanding of the style personality that you have. So then it cuts out all the vast choice in the shops and you can really hone in on what suits you. But I'm really interested in the whole conversation around identity and being authentic anyway. And I thought this time I'm going to ask a proper psychologist on to just really talk through why this is so important. And, everyone's talking about being your authentic self at the moment as well. So welcome, Susie. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. No, thanks very much for having me.
I wonder if you could just give me a bit of background about yourself, because I know you specialise in the identity area as well.
Yeah. So I'm a social psychologist. Psychologists come in all different shapes and sizes, and so my interest is in our psychology as it relates to our social world, which is why this question of what we wear and how we communicate who we are is of real interest. Specifically, I'm really interested in our social identity. So I do most of my research in the area of social identity, which is effectively our understanding of who we are because of the groups we belong to, the way we categorize ourselves, the context and culture we live in. So it's all how all those influences are sort of make up who we are, our sort of sense of self. I'm a researcher at Sussex University, so I'm currently doing my doctoral studies at Sussex, but I'm also, I work as a psychologist consultant in government research, and also I do private one-to-one coaching around identity change and managing identity change to support resilience and well-being. So lots of various things, as well as being a mother of two, and so busy life, lots of homeschooling mixed in there too.
I mean, yeah, exactly. I was just saying how I'd been writing an essay before coming on here with my son. We're all homeschooling here in the UK again. So something that really, I think people, like you said, we fall into these kind of roles throughout life. So, you one of the roles is that we're mothers.
Yeah.
And you have to sort of be practical in what you wear when you're a mum, running around when they're babies. Obviously, they're going to, be sick on you and all that kind of stuff. Just you need a practical wardrobe. So what we wear is definitely affected by our roles and what we need our wardrobe to do for us. But that can make you feel lost, which is, and then you lose your sense of self. And that's really what I really wanted to talk about. When it relates to style, but also, as you get older, I think you can feel lost as well.
Absolutely. And, a big part of, our identity changes throughout our life. People, and I think sometimes when we talk about this quest for the authentic self, it actually can sometimes create quite a lot of pressure because people think, what is it? I must know it. And actually, at about the age of 40 is when most people are finding that they have gone through big life transitions, whether that's through work or becoming a parent or losing parents, lots going on at that time in life. And actually, there's a lot of confusion and uncertainty about who I am. Who am I at this age? How am I different from how I was before? And what am I turning into? And that period of life, when people then say, be your authentic self, is hard because people say, I don't know what that is anymore. I'm really lost. And I'm really also at the mercy of all these other voices and narratives around me telling me what I should or shouldn't be, what I can and can no longer wear. And that means that it's actually a very stressful and tricky time to navigate that particular part of our journey. So yeah, it's a sort of really important part of our life from a point of view of our well-being and our general happiness, because we're right at that crunch point.
Well, I mean, that's exactly one of the reasons I started this podcast in the first place, was because I was fed up of reading in articles everywhere, and it's still everywhere now. Actually, it's quite amusing to Google what shouldn't you wear over 40, because I think that there's so many rules of what you're not able to wear anymore. You have to sort of blend into the background, when actually the more important thing is to really, in a way, you should be more confident, because you should be more rooted
absolutely
in who you are.
Yeah.
And it's sort, you sort of touched on it at the beginning. It's this, your personal style it's a mixture of all your influences that you've
Yeah,
had.
absolutely. And it's really, I think we tend to, traditionally, we've tended to think that people are sort of not one-dimensional, but that we have a very clear persona and characteristic that remains the same throughout life in different contexts. But we know from the research that we're actually multiple selves. We're rather like people who, right, for those who can remember, if we were talking to women over the age of 40, Mr. Ben would go into the changing room and change his outfits and have a different adventure and a different story. And in many ways our life is like that. We put on the clothes that we're going to be homeschooling in, that will probably not be the ones that you want to wear when you're also out meeting your friends and having a drink, which again are going to be different from the ones when you're in the workplace, which might be again different ones from when you're going on holiday or when you're standing up giving a presentation. And so all those different places, all those different social scenes influence us in different ways, and we're also communicating different parts of who we are. So different parts of us come to the fore in those different spaces, and that's not, I think people sometimes confuse that with being inauthentic. But actually it's not. It's actually an expression of the fact that we are multiple selves. We have lots of different aspects to our identity. We're a composite of all those wonderful influences that make us who we are. But sometimes that can also be quite confusing. It can be quite overwhelming to think which one's really me. Well, actually, we're all those things, and we should celebrate that.
So you can curate, yeah, because you can, to an extent I curate my own image, because I knew I was going on, well, not to an extent, I really do. I was going on this Facebook Live. I had this other dress on before, and I just didn't feel that it looked stylist enough,
Right. Yeah.
So I ran upstairs and I had like literally 2 minutes, and I just changed into the nicest dress I could find that I knew would look good on camera, because I want to curate my image.
Yeah.
And curated as, curating, like you say, how can it be inauthentic? Because it's still, I'm now projecting the image I want to project.
Yeah, you're communicating with your audience through that filter of your clothes. That's what clothes are. They're like a filter between you and the outside world. They play an important part in allowing people to understand, hang on, when I'm talking to Lisa in this context, am I talking to Lisa the stylist, Lisa the mum, Lisa the wife, and that helps us oil the sort of machinery of social life. So we also use those cues to tell us, what might we talk about? Well, we're going to talk about style, because all the cues are telling us that this is a conversation about style. If we were tramping through the woods in welly boots and Barber jackets and walking dogs, like the scene is different again, and different identities would be at play. So we use our clothes to signal and to symbolize who we are at any one moment in time.
And make us feel a certain way as well. So, there's all those studies, aren't there, about when people put on doctor's coats.
Yeah.
I think they've suddenly become more professional, or people sort of take them seriously. Or if someone's got what are those jackets called, the luminous jackets, I don't know what they're called,
high vis jackets,
high vis that official people wear, and immediately they've just got this officiality about them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's trust, and then you trust them. But this is what I talk about a lot on the podcast, which I wanted to dive into with you, which is about the know, like and trust factor, and how, because some people say dressing well is frivolous, it doesn't mean anything, it's materialistic, it's shallow, right? It's all those things, whereas I do not see it like that in any way, because for me clothes are a tool, they are my armor. They are my, I kind of in a way hide behind them, I guess, because I'm curating something I want you to see, but it's the non-verbal communication. And if it is shallow, I'm sorry, but putting on a nice dress makes me feel happy.
Yeah. Well, people will have the different motivations for why they dress the way they do. And that feedback is really important. And as you say, there's some amazing, sort of to use a bit of sort of technical language, it's called enclosed cognition. Like, we're literally wrapping up our thoughts in clothes, and depending on what we choose to wrap ourselves in will influence our thoughts about ourselves. So, if you put on the white lab coat, the research suggests that you think with more clarity and authority. There's a great study of putting people in superhero t-shirts, and they actually rated themselves to be more superior, better and more likable than other people who weren't wearing superhero t-shirts. And just that filter isn't just saying something to the outside world and people around you, it's also saying something to yourself, changes the way we think about ourselves, maybe accentuates certain parts of our personality and plays down others. So there's a constant sort of fluid movement of what we're choosing to wear and when and why. And I think that the tricky bit is that we tend to think we have a lot of control over that, that there's a lot of agency. I choose what I wear, I choose what I express, this is my identity. But as you mentioned earlier, we're still at the mercy of quite a lot of rules, of societal expectations, of cultural practices that also tell us what we should or shouldn't be wearing. And so that can be, really, really difficult and can lead to some problems where the two sort of clash. I want to be like this, but at the same time, I can't because my workplace or my boss or my culture is telling me that I'm not allowed to express it in that way, and I must conform to other people's expectations.
Yeah, because that means that you can't be authentically yourself because you're feeling limited, aren't you? That's so limiting to have those kind of pressures on you.
Yeah.
Then if you are sort of naturally inherently your style is quite avant-garde, for example, but you beige yourself down, you dull yourself down, in order to fit in.
Yeah, exactly. And I think where people say, oh, it's frivolous or silly to think about what you're wearing, quite often it's because the fashion industry is by and large focused on youth. The fashion industry is it's changing slightly now, but by and large it makes its money probably on people under the age of 50 traditionally, and it also presents its clothing, although I think again big organizations are starting to try and change that through diversifying their models and using not just on the basis of using women of color in their ad, but they're also using older women as well. But until there is more money to be found in the market of dressing people over the age of 40, the fashion industry at high fashion isn't going to be that concerned. So people see fashion increasingly as something that's moving into the distance for them and they're moving away from, and they're becoming more invisible. I mean, a lot of the research shows that there's just not much there. We don't know much about how women feel about fashion because people haven't asked the question, because they haven't thought it's important. But actually, it is really important to many people, and how they feel lost or overlooked or neglected is a really important part of our mental health and well-being as well. And so there's important questions around that. Wearing beige when you're older is almost choosing colours that make you not stand out, not get attention, to just fade into the background. And I think that's really sad, because I can't remember who wrote the poem now about when I'm old I'll wear purple. That wonderful Joe's, I can't remember her name now, but just that idea that, well, I will defy convention a bit, I will resist what people expect me to wear, and I will wear bright colours, and I will do those things. And it tells you a lot about actually the lot of pressure that people are under to conform to other people's expectations.
Well, exactly. And that's what really holds you back, isn't it? I mean, I'm sort of motoring towards 50 myself, and I've got this little voice inside my head saying, you're over the hill after that. You're kind of, and that's because of all the messages I have been fed throughout my life.
Yeah.
So, and subconsciously.
Yeah.
And it's hard. You have to be a tough cookie to kind of, put yourself out there and ignore all these messages completely.
Yeah. Well, we live in a culture which values youth and health and vitality and sexuality, and so the fashion industry naturally gravitates towards that. And when you're older and you might have health issues or mobility issues, you feel like there's a disconnect, and it comes down to identity. The fashion industry tries to get the attention of certain identity groups, and increasingly with age we feel that we're not part of that group anymore. We're part of a different group, a separate group, who shouldn't be allowed in. We somehow have lost our membership, and the velvet rope has been clicked back on, and we're on the other side of it, and we're suddenly thinking, hang on, why? And that is more acute for women than men. You only have to look at female news anchors and journalists and some of the struggles they've had. Thankfully that's now changing, but it's still there in the sense of the value you have to society as deemed by the culture that you live in.
Exactly. And this is going now into bias, isn't it? This is a really interesting topic. and also something that I mentioned quite a lot. So, it's that sort of unconscious bias. And that is so powerful. I just wanted to get your sort of take on that, but just, and how the non-verbal communication side of what you wear, which is why clothes are really powerful.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
you're communicating with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a lot of interesting research that looks at things called like thin slicing, where you effectively, it's first impressions, effectively the first sort of 5 minutes, you can fairly accurately gauge somebody in terms of what they're like and probably some of the key personality traits they might have, from the not, many of the verbal, we use tone of voice and what they're talking about, but we use a lot of non-verbal cues around what they look like, what clothes they choose to wear, and we read them, like a symbol, Yeah, absolutely. We sort of look at what they're wearing and we interpret their clothes as signs that only make sense within our certain cultural context. So it might not work if you're, off in, other continents, but certainly we have our own sort of codes of practice about, well, people from this class or people from this part of the country or women or men wear X, Y, and Z. And we are constantly interpreting the person in front of us. And we do that very rapidly. And we do form very quick, quite judgmental views. And again, research bears it out that even the smallest change in our physical appearance, a woman wearing a slightly shorter skirt, still at the knee, but slightly shorter, can lead to quite derogatory judgments if they're senior leaders in organizations from men. And the interpretation will be, well, it's a little provocative. Their skirt isn't below their knee, it's at their knee. It's a shorter skirt. So, or the button is slightly undone on their blouse, and it will be seen as wrong. It will be seen as not of the identity of what we expect of senior females in organizations. And so, all of those sort of undercurrents and expectations are operating. And what we wear is a very quick way for people to make those judgments about us, which is, it's quite soul destroying at one level, because you think, geez, I don't have a chance, what am I going to have to just wear a high collar and a trouser suit? And I think that's where it's also become problematic, because then people, and women in particular, feel they have to conform to some male rule book about and so I think it's great when you see role models who can express who they are in a very feminine or otherwise form, whichever one they feel is right for them, and wear those things with pride and say, it is not about, my clothes are an expression, but there is far more to me than that. But psychologically, we make quick first impressions. Our clothing primes people's expectations of who we are and who we're likely to be. And our clothes are sort of signs of which group we want to belong to. And I was listening to one of your videos earlier, you were talking about were you a goth? You were saying you were something in the past.
Yeah, I was like grungy. I was grungy, like grunge girl. I was into
yeah. So yeah, grungy, which is different from goth. I mean, these identity groups are really important.
Yeah.
But they are ways for us to say, I belong to that group. Bowden is like an identity group, isn't it? It's like you can spot a Bowden parent or a Bowden child because they're conforming to that lifestyle, that whole value system that we believe are people who wear Bowden or whatever labels. We're also buying into the value system that brand has been constructed to sort of appeal to.
Yeah, I mean, I attach, so Bowden for me is very country, not very city, and then sea salt brands like that are quite New Forest. It's sort of you do attach these kinds of thoughts to things, and it's people would say, well, this is wrong. This is you should don't judge a book by its cover. You should be able to wear what you like, and people shouldn't judge you. It should be, is she good at the job? Full stop.
Yeah.
Can she do the job? Doesn't matter what you look like, but that I think it's naive.
Well, really. I think, I mean, if you're talking about making a good first impression, and having a good first impression, you need to think about, the whole thing. You need to think about how, not what, what you sound like, what you're going to say, what your opening words are going to be, what you're going to wear, because people will make those judgments. We do, and also what we put on does prime our own thinking. That's what the whole sort of Galinsky work, this like white lab coat, wearing a superhero t-shirt, you know, what we put on feeds back and influences our own belief about ourselves and our own mood and our own values. And so that can be quite powerful, you know. So if you do want to go for a job interview and feel like you own the room, or you can certainly hold your own in that conversation, you know, choosing an item of clothing that gives you that confidence, you know, choosing that jacket or wearing that particular piece of jewelry, or, you know, wearing your hair in a particular way, all of these things are really important, not just because they're projecting outwards a particular identity, but they're also changing the way we think about ourselves. It's rather like being on stage and going to the dressing up box and, you know, pulling out something because you're going to be that person today. And that's not inauthentic. That reflects the fact we're many things to many people.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Mr. Ben reference as well. I used to love that show.
Yeah,
Mr. Ben, I feel nostalgic about that.
yeah.
Like you say, yeah, as well, women had to dress like men years ago, didn't they, to be
Yeah.
taken seriously in the workplace, hilariously, like with their Thomas Pink shirt, two-piece suit, cufflinks.
Yeah.
You know, no one was allowed to be feminine.
Yeah.
That's definitely
Uniform.
changed.
Yeah.
It's a uniform. It was absolutely uniform.
Yeah.
That has definitely changed, though.
Yeah.
I think, you know, that is becoming, but it's whether the woman who is wearing that dress feels, you know, it's her perception of herself as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
She might feel a bit exposed by wearing, you know, that's a mindset thing.
It is, but it's an important question, I think, when we're looking at big questions in organisations in the world, like equality and diversity and inclusion. You know, if you're expecting everyone to conform to a particular type of uniform, and we know that what people are wearing are influencing their thoughts and values, then that person is also conforming to practices and beliefs and behaviours of that group or organisation. So, you know, if somebody's got quite out of the box ideas and thoughts and beliefs and values that actually would be really good for your business, but you insist on them conforming to type, and then you worry about why there's not greater diversity in your organization, well, maybe opening up and letting people have more expression through what they wear would also empower them slightly to bring some of those ideas to the table. So there's always a balance. Organisations like to have a bit of control over what their staff wear and put them in uniforms and make sure there's a sense of organisational consistency. You know, our people look like this or dress like this? And if you work for McDonald's or something, maybe that's very important. But I would question the role it plays in workplaces where you want people to bring their whole selves and their creativity and their different perspective to work, and yet you expect them to wear something where they don't feel like that's them, because it's going to close them down.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, this is why being your authentic self is so powerful. And this, the colour analysis system, so Colour Me Beautiful, came over 25 years, maybe longer, that's probably 35 years ago or something. It started off with this artist noticing that when he let his students pick the colour of paint that they would work with, they just did much better work. So when they were told, you know, you need to paint this painting in these colours, and you know, it basically shut them down on some level. But when they were able to choose the colours that they were naturally drawn to and aligned with their inherent selves, then they did this brilliant work. And that's really what it is with the clothing thing, isn't it? To feel comfortable like yourself. Yeah,
absolutely. And to feel, you know, it's hard because people are always worried about what other people think, you know, and people are worried if what I wear is an expression of who I am, what if people don't like what I wear? Does that then mean that they don't like me? And the rejection of my choice of clothing is a rejection of me and my identity. And that can make people feel quite vulnerable. And so, you know, when you talk about dressing as armor, I think quite often people do that. They'll wear something that they feel will protect them from the judgment of other people, or they're not ready to share that aspect of their identity out there because they're worried about the judgment it might have or how they might feel. Because, you know, our identity is a huge part of our self-esteem and our self-worth, and we want to protect that. And so we can use our clothes as a sort of filter to the outside world to try and express it, but also protect it, you know. And I think that's a really great thing about clothes and style and what we choose. It allows us to have that ability to do it. And I really notice, and in fact, especially probably since, you know, talking to you about this topic before, you know, what am I choosing today and why? You know, why am I putting those on? Why would I make myself, why would I choose something a little bit special today? You know, how's it affecting me? And I certainly know if a day is going to be pretty challenging, it is quite nice to put on your favourite sweater or a squirt of your best perfume or put on that piece of really important jewellery, because actually it can give you a sense of, sort of positive self-regard, because it's expressing something about you that you may feel just needs to be shored up and protected or nurtured a little bit more. That can be really healthy, especially when you're in lockdown and you're feeling like it's, day after day, it's the same thing happening. Shall I just stick on that, top and jeans again? So, I think there's a great versatility and opportunity to dress up. Just, when my children go to the dressing up box, I love it when they pull out mad clothing and odd hats and
watch what they're doing. Yeah, creating, just going for it and not caring about the rules that our society have put in place, and whether someone's gonna, if you're gonna fit in, if you go out to a pub or you do a presentation or whatever, what you're wearing, are you going to look right?
Exactly. And mixing it up. I remember my daughter put on a pink Barbie sort of short skirt over the top of my son's Batman doll. And it was just the best thing. I wish I had it in the room actually, but it was brilliant. It was just like, why not mix all this
unexpected, but why not? Because the unexpected combos are usually really good. I mean, personally in lockdown, I've still been getting quite dressed up, because that gets me through, and if you do wear jogging bottoms and a grey top every single day and don't do your hair and don't do your makeup, then you start to feel drab and you start to feel, I think it drags down your mood.
And that's the thing. It's really, it is a very personal thing. People will feel differently about their relationships with clothes and style and what they need and what they don't need. But at the same time, it's important, I guess, to not generalize that everyone feels the same way about clothes or hair or makeup, that some people are perfectly happy to not give it a second thought and it doesn't influence them that much. But also fundamentally, we are all social animals. We go around the world looking and watching and reading each other to give us a sense of who people are and what they might be about. And I think that's really fascinating. And there are really powerful rules out there, about what you can and can't do. And I think, clothes are actually one way of being able to resist that. I love it when you see somebody who is, older, who just wears something really interesting and different and really says something about who they are. And I think it's really empowering, especially if it's a woman. But if you see a dapper gentleman with his pocket square and it's like that's wonderful, quite right.
I love that. I love Iris Apfel on Instagram. So she's 99 now, and she's a real style icon. She's out there. I mean, I wouldn't wear anything she wears because it's too wacky for me, but she looks amazing and I love following her. But I mean, it's just like you say, this is, the human level stuff. So I always thought that it was the bias thing, and reading people was like a safety thing from back when we were cavemen even, and we were just sort of assessing, are we safe in this environment? That's where it comes from. So it's inherently in us.
Oh, we make very quick, often first of all emotional and then cognitive judgments. So we're always effectively at some level in a sort of surveillance mode where we're just kind of like, what's going on? Am I safe? Is there anything I need to worry about here? And then in traditional terms, we'd be looking for that tiger that's about to spring out of the bushes and attack us, and then we go into fight or flight mode. But we are, we can only survive by reading the world in which we live and the people who are in it and the signs and symbols. And we're constantly taking that and interpreting it and forming an understanding. We have to, otherwise we can't get by day to day. And so, on the basis that we're not all running around naked and we, clothe ourselves every day, we are wearing a different message every day. We're communicating every day, we're expressing every day something about who we are. And that can change depending on where we're in and whether it's work or home or school or wherever else. But it's really interesting and really important. And I think when it comes to seeing how that can control people's behavior in organizations or in society, it becomes a really important question, because then it comes about, well, who's telling you what you can and can't do? And is that right?
Yeah,
I mean, do we need to challenge that?
I mean, it's great. I understand with, people should be able to wear what they want to work because it then, brings out their creativity and all of that. But of course, then the company wants people to be on brand.
Mm.
And so, for some people, they don't know how, they maybe go too casual. So it's quite difficult, isn't it, to sort of, to get it right. But if they had a bit of a code,
yeah,
then it would be better. And I know a lot of companies are going smart casual now as well. They're moving away from that uniform thing. But I noticed recently, just because I look at a lot of TED Talks, and the thing most commented on is what the person's wearing. Not much, quite often.
really.
This person has put themselves out there. They are delivering an amazing talk. They are putting their heart and soul into this. They're giving you some real value, and it's you've Googled this, whatever, and then people are commenting on the dress was awful. Or, I mean, it's not right.
It's heartbreaking, isn't it, for the poor person who is, just digested their life's work into 17 minutes at a TED Talk. But we do, it is like a picture paints 1,000 words. We do very quickly visually take in a lot of information. If we're visually enabled people and we can see what's in front of us, we are, from the moment we see it, we're bringing that information in. We have an emotional and a cognitive response to it. So it's not just we say, oh, look, there's Lisa and she's wearing a red dress. That red dress will have emotional tags for me that will go into the Rolodex of my memory and will pull out someone who probably looks a bit like you, maybe a dress I've seen like that, or in a movie I've seen, all of this, all of the memories and associations and sort of schemas we have will come into play to help my interpretation of who you are for me. It might be different for someone else, but that's happening, at a very automatic level, without consciously realizing it. I mean, sometimes that's why we have to be more mindful about our judgments and our, very much so our biases, to check in with them and say, okay, I recognize these are happening. That doesn't make it right or good, and it certainly doesn't make it right or good to act on them. But let's be realistic, they are happening. So, let's just be aware of that and be sensitive to it. But at the same time, can we use that to our advantage if it's a case that we want to make a bold statement, or we're going in to have a difficult conversation, or we're having to meet an ex-partner, or, whatever it is, called in to see the head teacher to talk about our kids, whatever the question is.
Say whatever you're doing, then use it to your advantage. But that's the whole thing. It is
communicate on all levels. You might have a strong and great voice, but you've also got all this other means to express yourself at your disposal. Why not use them?
So just to finish, I love all this. It's so interesting. But just to finish, I just want to, to know who your authentic self is from a psychology point of view. Is that sort of values? I mean, I do it from a style perspective, so that's the non-verbal communication. But from the inside, what is that knowledge of your authentic?
Who is it? Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I don't think it is one thing. Different psychologists will have slightly different views on this, but as a social psychologist, my view is that I am a composite of who I have been growing up, but all of the different social influences that have influenced me growing up and are present now. So and those are about my identity. So I'm a sort of a mosaic, if you like, of all these different things, which is a mother and a psychologist and a researcher and a wife, and my nationality and my ethnic background and the experiences I've had. So I'm this really, no one else is like me. I mean, this is why we are unique, and maybe that's where the authenticity sits. It sits in the fact that I am this, I'd like to think, nice mosaic of all these influences. Sometimes, depending if I'm at work or whether I'm at home with my children, different parts will shine through more than others. But that's not my attempt to try and conceal part of me and reveal another part. That's just part of the fact that we're really fluid and we flux and move depending on who we're with and what the context is. And all those things are having an influence on you. So it isn't something that just sits inside you. It's something that is in the moment of all the different influences that are there at that time. Yes, who you were and how you were brought up, but also the conversation you're having in that moment, the room in which you're sitting, the politics that are going on at the time, the tensions, the culture, the language. They are creating us in that moment. And I think it's really exciting because it means a lot of change. And of course, that means a lot of uncertainty, but it also means a lot of opportunity. because we are quite a rich tapestry of all these different threads running through us. So I think, you know, when I do my coaching work, I look at that sort of tapestry, if you like, and rather than trying to sort of get to the nub of who somebody is, this sense that there's some inherent unchanging bit of you, Lisa, I would look at you more as a sort of rich stream of lots of different influences and explore, well, what do they mean to you? And are they important? And are they serving a purpose in your life, or are they getting in the way?
Values,
And
what are your values?
yeah, how do you represent those different parts of you every day? And do you like that? Does it work for you? If not, why don't you change it? Because you do have the, you know, to some degree, and for some people, it's not true for all people, we have that ability to be able to control that. And if we don't like the other controls on us, we can resist them and say, you know what, I'm going into that golf club and I'm not wearing a skirt, or, you know, whatever it is that the rules dictate about what we should and shouldn't do. And I think when people start to do that, they change expectations. And I think that's really powerful as well.
Yeah, and we evolve all the time as well, which is why I say to my clients to do the wardrobe edit, you know,
Absolutely.
a couple of times a year, because you're not the same person that you were.
And I think things can really hold us back because we tend to like to think that, you know, we've got to be this consistent self, you know, and somehow we're doing ourselves a disservice. And yes, it's important to our mental health to have a sense of consistency. You know, we don't like to think of ourselves as being radically different throughout our lives. We like there to be a nice sort of thread running through our story of our lives. And sometimes keeping that old leather jacket is a way of keeping part of that important identity alive. We might not wear it very often, maybe we don't wear it at all, but it's part of our story, and that's fine. But at the same time, recognizing that it is changing, and you, as a result of that, you've got the opportunity to recognize that change and become, you know, what it is you want to be, and discover something else, not just keep recovering back to what you once were, but discovering that actually, whether you're turning 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, whatever, it's the beginning of a new chapter.
Yeah, and you can change what you're wearing to reflect that. And you can, you know, if you've been not wearing fashion all your life, you can now wear it. It doesn't matter. There's no age, no barrier.
Yeah, yeah. It's within your gift to, you know, every day, if you like, express a different part of who you are, whether it's putting on a different piece of jewelry or a different jacket, wearing makeup, not wearing makeup. You know, sometimes it's the absence of things that also expresses who we are. That's fine. You know, and sometimes actually not wearing makeup is a way of saying this is me expressing a different part
of who I feel today. Yeah, exactly.
You know, and you know, so I think we've got, sometimes that can be quite empowering when we just decide to do it, because it gives us the sense that we don't have to conform to everything else. We can just express who we are and have fun while we're doing it, and know that actually, if it's a positive thing, it's having a really nice, virtuous impact on our beliefs about ourselves. And I think sometimes we can all do with that boost.
We all need a bit of a boost at the moment, definitely. Yeah. I'm hoping that after lockdown finishes, everyone's going to go mad and really dress up. Thank you so much for coming on, Susie. That was amazing.
You're very welcome.